You know, for all the choosing a paladin and being cool talk I did before, yeah, you kinda need a sorceress to MF in this game. Welcome to the mini playthrough of the pure lightning sorceress in Diablo 2 Resurrected. Now if you're new here and need a lesson on what a mini playthrough is, you can either A. check out my previous video where I describe it in short in the beginning, B. read the description, who am I kidding, it's not 1922, people don't read anymore, or C. just watch the video, I'm sure you'll get the hang of it. So, what am I doing in this one? Well, since this is a new game and a new stash, I want to get an MF character up and running, and the Sorceress is the best way to do that. I've almost put my stat points in Dex there. Yeah, keep it in your pants, Chinmay. We're not doing melee Sorc. Yet. What we're focusing on today is pure lightning, mainly because I've never done it before. Full discretion, I started making this mini playthrough pre 2.4 big patch. Not that I think that it will affect my build in any ways, just hoping that it doesn't completely lock me out of my previous characters like season changes in PD2 did. Anywho, let's talk about the video game here. For the den, I was planning on using a combination of Charged Bolt and Firebolt. However, since this was my first experience streaming as well, therefore I was playing like shit, I didn't even get enough gold to get mana potions and thus just had to smack Corpse Fire to death. Maybe we are doing a melee sorceress. Nah, not quite. Charge Bolt is still going to be my preferred skill in the lightning tree starting out, and it is great for AoE. Even against single monsters, especially ones like Blood Raven that just like to juke your attacks, Charge Bolt makes it quite a bit easier to take those down. One fight that you can keep the Firebolt staff for from the start is Rakunishu, more from a defensive standpoint than an offensive one. Now, he is always lightning enchanted and thus will take less damage from your charged bolts, yes, but his HP pool is so low that it often doesn't even matter. What does matter is often how much his charged bolts end up doing to you, and thus having a firebolt staff clears up the confusion and lets you dodge his charged bolts a bit easier. Otherwise, this happens. Yeah. Like I said, first time streaming, playing like shit. Good thing this isn't hardcore. Yet. Anywho, one thing that I managed to do despite my stream copes was find the Countess Tower and do some Countess runs for some juicy runes and levels, which are both quite useful for the Sorceress. Even though lightning skills do a lot of damage, you do feel kinda weak starting out, simply because of how frail you are with this girl. However, after this grind session, most Sorcs reach around level 12, which means that not only does Charge Bolt start doing respectable damage, but you also get some other nice additions to your gear by this point, like some FCR jewelry to increase your overall DPS. Of course, by the time you're done with the Countess runs, you can expect to add more FCR to your arsenal with the help of the obligatory stealth. Tal-Eth in a 2 open-socketed grey armor, and what can I say about this that I don't in every single video except that it is great. More so for casters since it allows you to reach the higher FCR breakpoints quite easily as well. Yes, the faster run walk and FHR are nice bonuses as well, but this is one of those armors. Even though I build this in Act 1 normal, there is a good chance that it would stay on my Sorc all the way through Act 5 hell, simply because of that 25% FCR bonus. Speaking more on the FCR situation, I also shopped at Akara for a wand of Apprentice. This suffix allows wands to spawn with 10% FCR. Since I have one FCR piece already, this will allow me to get to 20 FCR immediately to get to the 20 FCR breakpoint. Then once I get to level 17, thanks to stealth, I can get to 45 FCR to get past the 37 FCR breakpoint. Again, thanks to the 10 provided by this wand as well. Along with this, I also invested in a Ral helmet. That is actually pretty important for the Sorceress as well, as you will see later, since she is terribly frail as is and does need pretty much any support that you can provide to her overall survivability. The 60 to fire res is a huge bonus and really pays off starting Act 3 and up. For now, let's just finish up Act 1 first, and to do that we have a very sloppy Andariel fight. First stream, okay? It's fine, it's allowed. To be fair, Andy fights with Sorcs can be rough as is since you don't have any fire damage, unless you're a fire sorceress, duh, and thus the best bet to kill her is static field or just use your charge bolts. Both offensive maneuvers that can land you in sticky situations where you are a bit too close to the Poison Queen, and given how frail the Sorceress is, she can hurt a lot. Therefore, hopefully after listening to all those copes, you can probably forgive my abysmal performance using all the rejuvenation potions as I did in this fight, or whatever happened after the fight either. I swear I'm good at this game, guys. Now upon reaching Act 2, two major changes happen. First is that I get access to better mana potions. Honestly, you might not think of this as a big change, but it is, since these light potions will allow me to respec and use the build that I plan to carry all the way through Nightmare, Nova. Now Nova does more damage than Charge Bolt at this stage, and I would argue it has better AoE in the fact that it is more controlled. More than that, it has no synergies, so this build allows me to put points into other skills like Frozen Armor and Frost Nova, both of which are used for defense, but in a very different way. Also, I got 1 point into Telekinesis and then put points into Nova. Now as you can see, I did end up with a lot of leftover skill points. These I can then put into Static Field, giving me a very solid way to bring down enemies' HP down to low very quick. Points into Static Field only increase its range, but that is what we want here as it makes it viable to be used in my regular flow of attacks. Also, I saved 1 skill point here that I will use at level 18 to get 1 point into Nova and 1 point into Teleport, both at the same time. Now to see this build in action, let's step into the wilderness of Act 2. What you do here is you start off first with Frost Nova to freeze nearby enemies, use Static Field a couple of times to get their health down low, and by that point you can pretty much one-tap things with Nova. It's really effective both offensively and defensively and actually works really well all throughout Act 2, as you just saw there. Other than that, no major changes occurred in my build till I reached Arcane. This is where I reached level 18, and as mentioned in the previous clip, I was able to invest my saved skill point into Teleport. Now with Teleport, this does open up all sorts of opportunities for the Sorc to just smoke through the game. However, as you can see, the mana potions are a huge limitation. Even the regular mana potions that I will get access to in Act 3 are not good enough to sustain Teleport continuously, and thus these light ones really struggle. But hey, I'll still take teleporting slow over not teleporting at all any day. Teleporting through, I made my way to Duriel's lair. Now in the live stream, someone mentioned that Duriel was going to be a real wake-up fight for me. Pfft, they underestimate my power. Look at the strats here. Frost Nova plus Static Field plus... Okay, my Merc died, and now I'm also about to die. Okay, new strats. These are called running away and sometimes attacking strats. Thankfully they worked. Never punished. Now Act 3 brings along an opportunity to slow things down and farm for a bit in the Kurast Bazaar at Serena's temple. Now with the Sorceress you can just blow through the game and kill normal Baal at like level 21, but why would you? If you're playing casually, farming here to level 24 will probably give you a better experience overall, and it will also be safer if you're playing hardcore. I, of course, am not playing hardcore. Just a friendly reminder there in case, anybody was confused. On a more serious note, doing these runs with a Sorceress can be pretty risky as is, since these guys do run at you and do a lot of physical damage. Therefore, hiring a mercenary just to take the initial few hits is a pretty decent strategy, along with having Frozen Armor cast / also casting Frost Nova to give yourself the best chance of surviving before going on the offensive. The Mephisto fight thankfully posed not a lot of problems for me. He can be scary, his Charge Bolt and Frozen Orb attacks being the most vicious, but as you can see, the ones that he used most against me were his Poison Cloud, while also smacking me in the face occasionally. Rude. Therefore, I was able to just sit at a pretty good range for him to static him down to low HP and brought him down with Nova from there. The drops were really nothing special, but these boots are honestly pretty alright. Frost Nova when struck can be a surprisingly useful defensive tool, and thus I'll definitely take this over the placeholder heavy boots that I had on at the moment. Now the quality of this mini playthrough is going to decrease for a while since I did a stupid and forgot to press record for the entirety of Act 4. Thus I'll be stripping my stream for the footage. Thankfully not much of notice really happened here. It was a pretty standard affair of me just teleporting through the entire Act 4 and then taking on Chaos, all done within 20 minutes. That's because Magic Girl go fast, and that can be seen in this Infector fight. Now this fight is a pretty good showcase of the build as a whole, as I get to really use all the components of my offense against this guy. Starting with Frost Nova to keep him at a distance, by slowing down their movement, I move on to spamming static. That is where the extra points that you put into static to increase its range pay out huge, as you can run and weaken Infector both at the same time. Nova at the end just acts as a single tap to finish all the monsters off, once their HPs are extremely low. Decize and his boys suffer a similar fate. Again, for them, I do like to separate them from their father figure, just to increase the chance of the occurrence of a sudden death. They're pretty frail as is, so not a lot of static field is used here. For Decize, it is recommended in controlled amounts, but without his minions, his fanaticism is nothing but a red-colored light show at his feet. Finally, Grand Vizier was next, and he's actually the hardest boss to kill among the three, simply because of his high lightning resistance and mana burn capabilities, making life difficult for my high mana consuming lightning sorceress. However, it's not like he poses any threat damage-wise, so the situation was controlled and all good by the end. One fight which was the complete opposite of this one was Diablo. Now he has the ability to damage me real good real fast, but the same can be said about my sorceress against him. Static field absolutely cuts through his HP in normal, and yes, he can try to be all macho by swinging around with his stupid looking lightning attacks, but he isn't going to get long, as Nova will be able to finish the job that static field started. Now the Ancients fight can be scary for a multitude of reasons. Thankfully in normal you do not have to worry about the various scary rolls that these guys can spawn with, and thus you can just go and do your thing. By your thing I mean using Frost Nova to freeze them in place. This allows you to static field freely while staying at a distance, reapply Frost Nova whenever necessary, and repeat till they're down to basically 1 HP. Having a Merc here just as fodder is great as well, since he really lives up to the name of Meat Shield, shielding you from the Ancient's attack by putting his own meat on the line. That just sounds wrong, doesn't it? Anywho, from here, Nova can take this on. Maddock does take a little while to die due to his high lightning resistance, but it is nothing too bad. Next up were the waves. Now wave 3 is the first, which poses a bit of a problem since Bartek is always lightning enchanted, and thus is resistant to your attacks. For him, killing his minions and freezing him for the most part makes things easier, as when he's the only one left, you can just stand at a safe distance, static field him down to low HP, and then take him out with Nova. All you have to do is make sure that you don't get hit by his lightning bolts, since they will tend to do the most damage. Going forwards, waves 4 and 5 were free thanks to this gentleman's suggestion that you can just stand next to Baal while fighting these guys, and due to the stair structure, they will simply funnel in one by one, allowing you to take them down quite easily. Speaking of quite easy, Baal is a pretty easy kill as well. Static field is the main praiseworthy skill at this point. Its ability to chunk the bosses for large amounts of damage is amazing, especially in normal when it doesn't have a max cap. That is about to change though as we venture into Nightmare. Of course, that is not the only thing that is about to change. Nightmare is also the place where we can make some major gear upgrades. First things first, I decided to do a cow run in normal. Thankfully by this point I did realize that I wasn't recording, and thus we can go back to some nice high bitrate 1080p 60fps footage of the game as this girl takes on the cows. The reason that I'm taking on the Moo squad is because any crystal swords that drop here have a high enough item level that if I give them to Lazark for the socket quest reward, he will always give me 4 open sockets on them. That is great of course for making that one rune word that you all know and will probably see me make in a few seconds. That's because the next part of the big changes for this girl are going to be some Nightmare Countess runs. These are great not only for getting some pretty decent mid-game runes, but also pretty nice for leveling up to like level 34ish, which is a benchmark that I like having for the Sorceress leaving Act 1 Nightmare. One of these bosses included the lovely lasses that we call archers. Now, these are vicious as is, but for a frail character like the Sorceress with basically no HP and even worse FHR frames, these can be downright murderous. Therefore, it is always advisable to have a row of rejuvenations while dealing with them, otherwise this might happen. However, better gear does lead to better survivability, scientifically proven, and thus with the gear that I have accumulated over these Countess runs, I shall be able to clear Nightmare. This includes Spirit Sword as the main hand weapon. Now we did discuss on stream as to whether I should use this weapon or not due to how overpowered this is and how it literally makes a lot of cool MF finds kind of obsolete. In the end we reached the consensus that since D2R allows online only rune words now, I will continue using them in mini playthroughs but will deviate from this in other series. You'll see. Anywho, Spirit, Skills, FCR, Vitality, Mana, FHR. Do you want these stats in plentiful quantities? Well, this 1-4 open-socketed sword with a bunch of easy to find runes gives you all of that. Why? Well, even I don't know why, but it does, so we'll take it and roll with it. A much more reasonable staple is lore. Yes, almost all characters use this as well, but at least it only provides value with its modest stats of +1 to skills and 30 lightning res, two stats which mostly casters like this girl appreciate a lot. One item not really necessary for casters really is Rhyme. Remember, this isn't PD2, your casts are not slowed down by being frozen. Therefore, Ancient's Pledge almost always has more value than Rhyme does in the hands of a Sorceress due to the near 47 all res that shield provides as compared to Rhyme's 25. However, the stream wanted Rhyme for a bit of 25 magic find banter, and I had found a shale rune, and therefore I decided to make it. Still wearing the stealth armor mainly due to the FCR bonus, that is pretty hard to supplement at this stage of the game and thus it turns out to be the best in slot for the moment. With this, the 28% spirit that I rolled and another piece of FCR that I get from my amulet, I hit the 63 FCR breakpoint on the nose, and trust me, once you go from 63 from 45, it feels like absolute butter. Highly recommended. That's pretty great, and this amulet is not too bad neither, for Nightmare that is. 10 FCR with 6 all res is alright. Obviously plus skills would have been appreciated more, but this girl really does need the res, especially since I am compromising a bit on the shield. My jewelry makes up for this a bit though. This rare ring is not bad, but again, nothing special. 42 mana and 18 fire res. Other ring is pretty good though. 25 cold res, 26 lightning res, 5 fire res, and 8 MF as well. Pretty GG, but pretty sad is the fact that I may have to lose it at some point since it doesn't have any FCR on it, which I think I will desperately need going forwards. Let's not get too ahead of ourselves though, since we are in Nightmare, and for Nightmare I guess my lower third is not that bad. 20 fire res gloves, 27 lightning res demon hide sash, and 32 fire res boots. With all that and the help of some very basic charms, my res are pretty alright. The two important ones are capped and the rest too can be fixed with potions if needed. Now since I recorded this part a little bit later than starting Nightmare, my Sorceress is at level 39, and this also allows me to show you an additional gear piece that I would be using in my offhand, that being a lower res wand. This is great to get the resistances of monsters down below a level where you can easily take them out with lightning, especially since we all know how much lightning benefits from negative to enemy lightning resistance. Speaking of skills, the ones that we will be going for in Nightmare are actually going to be pretty similar to normal since we are still rocking the Nova build. Now, this is for a couple of reasons. First, the skill Lightning is a lot more dependent on gear / plus skills and getting damage from synergies. I don't have either at the moment. Nova on the other hand is a skill with no synergies, one prereq, and can be leveled up quite easily with Lightning Mastery. The one drawback with this skill is that quite like Freezing Arrow with the bows on, there will come a time when I will reach the damage cap since after Lightning Mastery is maxed, I will not have any other way to increase its damage. However, we will reach that problem when we get to it. The other reason that I'm holding out on Lightning is because of the FCR. Lightning has different FCR frames, remember, and thus I want to hold out till I have some GG gear in Hell to really use that skill to the max. Other than that, Nova also allows me to get a pretty high level of static field. Again, points in static field only increase its radius, but it is such a nice thing to have since you can literally use it on all monsters as part of your regular build before taking them out with Nova. Other than that, I just have a few points in the essentials, telekinesis, teleport, and 1 point into frozen armor as well. With that, let us cast said frozen armor and let's go take on Andy in Nightmare. Even before the fight officially starts, our girl has got a huge advantage in the form of having static field with Chunks and Dariel for a good 75% of her max HP. That is where the cap for Nightmare bosses is, but that's all good since Nova can take it on from here. Looking back, I didn't really need to be so close to Andy while static fielding in this fight since that does cause more danger to my Sorceress. Also, as you can tell here that Nova is not the best damage wise. It is good and you can see the utility of Frost Nova and of course static field, which really makes the whole build tick. However, to fix that little problem that we were having with Nova's raw damage, I decided to farm a bit at Nightmare Drognen for a lower res wand. I did this at level 35 because it is a pretty perfect level to do so since you can get a red background behind the wand before level 36 and thus it is easier to sort. One place where I could have used that lower res wand is the maggot lair. That is because not only are there a lot of lightning resistant monsters here, but also the maggot boss turned out to be lightning immune. Which is weird because I ended up killing it with Nova. Yeah. Neither me nor anyone else in the stream were able to figure out what really happened here. Like, the guy was indeed lightning immune since he had some mad stats that increased his lightning res beyond the level of being immune, but he still took damage like nothing was special about him. We'll take it, I guess? Hopefully the luck continues as we move forward to take on Duriel. Now for this fight I got myself a mercenary who just died in 2 seconds, okay? Well, the idea was there to basically use the mercenary as bait for Duriel so that he focuses all of his attention on him and then I can take him down with Nova. As you can see, the early fight with this build is super quick with Frost Nova plus static, but with Nova it does take more time. Frost Nova is still pretty good as is, as it slows down Duriel while he tries to paw at me with his giant nails, but Nova does take its sweet time to kill him. If only I had a wand that could lower the lightning resistance of Duriel, which would have allowed me to kill him much faster. Unfortunately, by looking at this clip, you'd be hard pressed to believe that any such thing exists. Anywho, he did die in the end, and if you are wondering, no, that rare amulet was not useful. Close, but not close enough. Now Act 3 Nightmare is not nearly the shit show for lightning characters as Act 3 Hell proves to be, and that is shown by this Travincal fight. The build works quite well here actually, with Frost Nova slowing everything down, static field chunking everything for good damage, and then Nova sealing the deal. Of course it is definitely helped by the fact that I face no lightning immunes in here, so definitely nice with the rolls. Mephisto don't take no prisoners though. Whether it be Nightmare or Hell, his elemental attacks are always scary if you don't have the best resistances. Therefore, having a higher level of static helps since you can stay away from him for the most part, giving you a higher chance of dodging his attacks. However, Nova does require you to stand in close proximity of the monsters, and since my cold res still wasn't the best, he pretty easily two-shot me with his frozen orb. Yeah. Let's try this again, shall we? This time actually utilizing the lower res wand as well. Now his cold damage still hurts a lot and he is able to exploit my less than ideal cold res, but with lower res wand, thankfully I was able to get him out of there quick enough to avoid any further embarrassments. Speaking of rips, the chaos. Now thankfully it wasn't me that was ripping here, but rather the monsters. Lower res just cuts through the resistances of monsters so much though and makes them much easier to kill, as you can see with the Infector fight. Since these guys are the bulkiest of the 3 boss packs that you normally face in the chaos, you can imagine that the fate of the rest too wasn't too great either. Against Diablo, I can also show off the fact that static field works pretty better with lower res as well. I don't know if it goes beyond the cap that is set by the difficulty. All the info on static field on the internet is conflicting as well, but it certainly seems to take the monster's HP go down faster with lower res, and the same can be said about Nova as Diablo was out of there in no time. I found an interesting drop from him as well when he died, unique gauntlets which were frost burns. The mana is always nice, but they are a bit of a high strength requirement, thus if I plan to use them, it'll most probably be in Hell. Now checking the rolls of the Ancients in Nightmare is not really that necessary as it can be in Hell, but it will save you a lot of headache. Especially like in my case, killing that lightning enchanted Talic would have been a massive pain in the butt, and thus resetting the rolls is almost always faster. Going into the fight, the main strat was to play around lower res. After that, I started letting static field go and chip down the enemies till they were at 25% of their health, and then go ahead with Nova. Again, you can see the big difference that lower res makes in this fight, as this was a relatively quick one. Korlik went down first, followed soon after by Talik. Although Mano does have the highest lightning resistance among the three, but with lower res, even he melts to Nova, and this fight was a done deal. As you can see, I was putting points into lightning mastery by this point, and next it was time to take on the waves. Now stop me if you've heard this one before, but the wave that gave this girl the most trouble first was wave 3. Yes, different difficulty but same problems, as Bartok is still lightning enchanted and takes forever to die from lightning damage from Nova. The only difference in this fight being that at Nightmare he packs quite a punch as well, so caution is an advisory while taking him on, especially head on. Unfortunately, new difficulty, same problems, but the same solutions don't work, as standing near Baal for wave 4 and 5 will probably just get this orc tore from limb to limb against them. Thus the best course of action is to fight while going back. Not an easy task mind you, so you can always choose to lead them out as well, but since I was streaming, my manhood was on the line, and thus, yeah, I killed Nightmare Lister with my Nova Sorc. Are you turned on yet? Well, if not, then this Baal fight will probably not help in that department. Like, at all. Yeah, let it be known, boys, that the final boss of the game's difficulty can indeed kill you. Thus, going in next time, I decided to get actually good and stop with the monkey dance I was doing with the first time. Thus, I cast lower res, static field to get him down, and then Nova from there. This is where you can see that Nova is falling a bit behind the curve at this point. The Baal kill does feel substantially slow, even with lower res. The unfortunate thing is that in the ensuing MF runs, it is not going to get much better, since by this point, my lightning mastery skill was almost fully maxed as well, which means that I had nothing to put my skill points into, which would increase my damage with Nova. Thus in Hell, I shall be changing my build to a lightning build, but for now we are stuck with Nova. Might as well try to find some nice things with it, as is. Also, let's hope I find some new things from those instead of another one of the Frostburn pair. Now, first things first in the MF runs is that I decided to gear up with some basic magic find stuff. Some gloves that I vendored from Charcy, a helm and chestplate with topazes, you know, the usual routine of broke MF character on a budget with no money to afford anything else. In terms of actual runs, I ran Nightmare Mephisto for a slightly increased odds of finding something GG from the magic find that I had stacked on, and then finished off with a Baal run. This was the major run, as not only did this have a chance of dropping something useful, but also it gave me XP, which I was farming to get around level 70, which is around where I like to start Hell. After I was done here, I also did some Nightmare LK runs to get a lot of gold. Like seriously, all the gold that I could amass, because I planned to do a lot of Galnig at Anya for better rings / amulets, because my current ones were not going to cut it in the next difficulty. With that done, I moved on to Hell. Not to face it necessarily, but to go for some Countess runs. One item that made it easier to take on Hell was something that I found from the aforementioned Mephisto runs, Moser's Blessed Circle. This shield with 2 perfect diamonds outperforms even the OG Ancient's Pledge, and thus was a great source of defense to have while taking on Hell without fully finalized gear. Beforehand though, I did clear the den, since I don't really want to be sticking to the Nova build in Hell, since like I mentioned before, I don't have any skill points to put in that would benefit me damage wise. Anywho, getting back to the reason that I came to Hell in the first place, at this point, Countess runs. Thankfully, the Countess in Hell is always fire and cold immune, and thus she is always a guaranteed kill. However, the archers in this place are vicious and did cost me a lot of time, since I did keep dying to them a few too many times than I'm willing to admit. So now that all the farming stuff is done, it is time to do my routine of standing here in front of my stash and showing you my gear. We're going to start with the weapon, Crescent Moon. This is in essence what really makes the build work. That minus 35% lightning res is so huge. It takes this girl from a sorceress who can do good damage to a monster, and if you're not lightning immune, you better run when she's approaching. Also, as you can see, it has a bunch of other stats on it as well. Yeah, literally all of them are useless. I mean, I guess magic absorb and mana after kill will have some value, but this really is a 1 stat item, but what a stat. Lightning really benefits from the minus lightning res mod, one of the reasons why infinity lightning source do so well in endgame, and you're about to see a demonstration of that very shortly. We have other gear that increases our damage as well, just not so drastically. Delirium, for example, is pretty cute, plus 2 to all skills, 10 vitality, 25% MF from that Ist rune that I somehow ended up finding while looking for an typical, and all those CDC effects can be pretty handy defensively, except for the 1% chance to cost level 50 Delirium. Yeah, that turns you into a doll. Would not recommend, 0 out of 10. Rest is pretty good though. Lidless Wall is also pretty good. Again, a small bump in damage in the form of +1 to all skills is always appreciated, but the 20 FCR is crucial for this girl. Also, as you can see, I have socketed this and put a perfect diamond in it because I do need those resistances, as they are super crucial for this girl as well. So continuing on that theme, my armor is smoke. That is the good thing about Lidless, is that it took over the duty of my stealth to provide me with 20 FCR, and thus I could switch over to this armor, which still gives me the FHR, but now with 50 all resistances, which again, this girl really needs as she is terribly frail. Thus for that reason, I decided to not go with anything special with the boots and just went for some standard cheap old Charcy with 37 fire res. Not exactly the prettiest things to look at, but they really get the job done. My other limb armor is kind of interesting though, Frostburns. I found like 3 pairs of these during this playthrough, so I had to at least use one of them. These are nice since they give a pretty significant bump to my mana, something which is important since lightning skills can be pretty mana intensive. My rings return on the resistance duty, but they also give me 10 FCR since I wanted to reach the 52 lightning breakpoint with this girl. Many claim that you cannot play lightning without the 117 breakpoint. That's nonsense. Yes, the 52 breakpoint is not the fastest thing in the world, but it still gets the job done, and it is very attainable. Not to mention, it allows you to wield weapons like Crescent Moon, which has no FCR, and still get away with it. Anywho, this ring is alright with a little bit of light and fire res, but the main purpose that it is serving is the FCR. My other ring is similar, although much nicer. 10 FCR, 36 to life, 56 to mana, 21 cold res, and 3 for the rest of the res. Pretty nice stuff to gamble from Nightmare Anya. The amulet came from the same source, and as you can see, fits a pretty similar role. FCR and resistances, this one providing 34 to lightning and 7 poison. Finally, for the belt, I had to go with a caster belt, but it worked out not too bad in the end since I was able to get a plus 42 to life modifier, which is pretty big deal on this girl since the life bonus that you get per vitality is puny. Thus, as you can see, she's sitting at 1000 HP and my res are 2, not too bad either. They can definitely be better, but my focus on res along with FCR has landed me with a pretty happy balance between offense and defense. Speaking of offense, let's talk skills, and as you can see, they all reside in the lightning tree. Starting off with the main damaging source, lightning. Now lightning damage with this girl has a huge min-max range, as this skill does 4 to 6,000 damage. Let's just say that it is interesting is the best thing that I can say for it. It is not too bad though, especially with the negative lightning res that you get from your gear. It is just weird to sometimes see your attacks absolutely smoke a monster's HP just to see the next attack do like 2 damage. Still, it works when averaged. To get along with, I have maxed chain lightning as well. This is binded to my secondary skill hotkey as I use it in tandem with lightning. That is because to effectively use the AoE of piercing lightning attacks, you really have to align monsters in a straight line, a task which is not always realistically feasible. Thus large spread out areas, you can just let chain lightning go and it does a pretty good job of entangling between monsters and doing good damage. Again, thanks in big part to the negative lightning res, trust me, the damage is that good. Then we have Lightning Mastery. You always gotta max this second since this provides more damage per skill point than any of the synergies do. Speaking of, the rest of the points are just distributed in synergies, those being Charged Bolt and Nova. Oh yeah, and always get a point into Static and Teleport as well since, well, why are you playing a Sorceress if you're not gonna get her 2 best weapons? Well, why are you playing a Sorceress if you're not gonna use her 2 best weapons? Speaking of weapons, the Mercenary. Yeah, he is dead at the moment. He does that. Quite a lot actually. It's not my fault though. I kitted him out with a strength rune word in a lance, treachery in a breastplate for attack speed and fade, and Erathos coil for lightning and fire res. It's just, I think he doesn't do enough damage and is not able to leech back enough, and thus he dies all the time. Also, lance is a pretty horrible base for a strength, as I have come to learn the hard way, since even with treachery it is terribly slow. Thus he attacks less often, gets hit a lot more often, and thus the leech is not able to keep up with the damage that he takes. All this can be solved with a better base for strength, and yeah, about that. I kinda had this at one point, and then I might have tried to hire a new mercenary and forgot to take this off of him. Yeah, I think that is definitely what I did. But it's okay. That thing was too heavy for him to wield anyways, and I don't even need him that much, just to kill essential lightning immunes, and okay, I'm all out of copes. Thus let us venture further into the dark lair of the Catacombs 4, where Andy is waiting for us and where I cannot wait to show off the damage that this girl is about to put in. Well, to start, there were no lightning immunes in this place, so that's a pretty good start as is. As you can see, my weapon of choice against boss packs is chain lightning, as it creates a trip of lightning wires which don't discriminate much and damages everyone at once. I did have this lightning enchanted boss right next to Andariel, which I decided to handle after I had static fielded her. That's the benefit of AoE that you get from lightning as well, since it is piercing. If you can line up enemies, you can damage multiple monsters at the same time, as I was doing here. Another benefit of lightning damage is the damage, especially once you cast lower res. Yes, I believe the official term would be I just smoked Andariel. That is the power of minus 35% lightning res provided by my crescent moon. But Chinmay, what about the lightning immunes, you ask? Well, my plan against those was the following. Buy a wand with life tap charges for the mercenary and pray that he can take them on. In this instance, where I was busy killing Radamant and his minions were indeed lightning immune, he did well. He did not die, which is mostly what I wanted off of him. I really don't care much for his damage at this point, just want him to attract all the lightning immunes away from me so that my sword can do her thing. That was a lightning enchanted Horadrum that my sorceress just eliminated. Thus, as you can imagine, a cold bug won't be that much of a problem to her. As you can see, I started this fight with life tap as I wanted to see if my mercenary can survive long enough for this to be a viable strat where I just distract Duriel long enough to cast lightning and kill him. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case as I found very soon into the fight. Still, lightning was still doing some solid damage, and once I decided to go to town and come back with the LR wand, Duriel was on his heels. Well, he wasn't, but he should have been. I mean, just look at this damage. If Act 2 had you worried, then Act 3 is here to say, hold my lightning immunes, because it has a lot of them. Thus, the wisest strat is mostly to avoid them by teleporting the other way or just get lucky lol and roll a map with cold immunes, because that is a possibility in some of the maps. Travincle is not one of them. Flamefinger and his minions are always going to be lightning immune. Thus, to handle them, I brought out my mercenary. Now with life tap and his strength rune word, he is able to handle them eventually, but it is slow. Right. Especially when you run into another unwelcome lightning immune broomstick man who just completely wrecks him with fire damage. Thus it turns out to be wiser to stick to the original game plan of only killing the lightning immunes that are absolutely necessary, skipping this dude entirely and then going forwards to fight Mephisto. One thing with this build is that I only have one point in the static field, and thus my range with that skill has reduced drastically, which really means I need to get in the boss's face to proc it. It more than makes up for it afterwards though, since the damage against single targets continues to be amazing. What's more, I can even mode trick Mephisto with this girl as well. Bliss Sork who? We're a lightning Sork and we're about to smoke Act 4 as well. That smoking begins by taking on Izzy in the Plains of Despair. Again, this quest reward of +2 to skills is huge for any caster, and therefore this quest is a must complete. Also, it helps that with the Lightning Sorceress you can absolutely slap this dude. I mean, here I was honestly just trying to show him some respect by clearing the mobs nearby him and then go for static field on him, but He literally died, mostly just from collateral damage.
I give you fucking collateral damage.
Works for me. The time for jokes was over, folks, because now it was time for the CS. So as you can see, my plan was to use my mercenary as... Okay, well, he's dead. Okay, new plan. I just killed him. Yeah. Arguably, this would have worked better with a lower res wand. Actually, there is no argument. It would have. I just wasn't ready because I really thought that my mercenary would be able to survive just a little bit longer with life tap, which would cause enough of a distraction for me to snipe down Infector. Nothing doing, unfortunately. As you can probably tell though, I used my mercenary's treachery on myself as well here to proc Fade before the fight. This has immense benefits of being at near capped res and also having 15% damage reduction. Not that I was planning to put my defenses to the test in this fight at all anyways. My plan really was to snipe everyone down from a distance with lightning. It is just, as the fight went on, and they were indeed tested, I think they passed with satisfactory results. That is to say, I didn't immediately die to a gust of wind like my mercenary. Speaking of him, yeah, I do need him to complete this fight since Infector is lightning immune, and thus after clearing most of his minions, I brought him back for a shot at redemption, and yeah. As you can see, when there is no crowd to bother him, he isn't all bad. That's about as much praise as I can give him, as he proceeded to die like 2 seconds afterwards when I was en route to kill Decisive. Thankfully, I didn't need his assistance against the Necromancer, as Decisive was fire and cold immune, and thus lightning was able to finish him off, no problem. One place where I did need him though was against Grand Vizier, as he is the first mandatory lightning immune that I have to kill. One thing that I realized a bit later on, and I can shed this wisdom of hindsight upon you, is the fact that lower res works wonders on these lightning immunes. Thus the shenanigans that I was performing with the mercenary and life tap here, totally irrelevant. Like there were times when in the Vizier fight when he would literally fly off stage and I would have to consider resetting. Thankfully that did not occur at the expense of my sanity, and my mercenary was able to do something with his life. Now to feed him to Diablo. Diablo did go the whole 9 yards with his roleplay as well, putting him in a cage and everything before roasting him to death. Once he was done satisfying his fetish though, I already had him lower than half health. Lower res plus lightning is just an absolutely deadly combo, and it shows in this fight. Even though I do not have the fastest FCR frames for lightning, I'm only at 52, which is 2 frames below the 117 standard. Fights go by so quick, just through raw damage, and I'm absolutely loving it. What's more, Diablo even dropped me a unique Ami for my troubles. Of course it was Nokuzin, but still, the man tried, okay? That's what counts. Okay, next was probably my favorite part of any mini playthrough, the Hell Ancients fight. I always consider this to be the final boss for my characters due to the limitations placed on you, as you cannot return to town. More so with this girl, this fight includes one of those mandatory lightning immunes in the form of Madoc. Thus if my mercenary was to die, things would become very difficult for me since I cannot resurrect him. To counteract this though, I took with me both my lower resistance wand and my life tap wand. Then it was time to roll the Ancients. The main thing I was avoiding here, besides the general overpowered stuff like Might Aura and Cursed, was a lightning immune Talic or Coralic, since those would add an extra layer of annoyance to the fight. Madoc is enough on his own. Thus once I got a roll which I thought I was happy with, it was time to start the fight. The general game plan here was to teleport around to separate the 3 dudes, which does work, just better with higher FCR. Here my girl was on the 45 FCR breakpoint for teleport, and thus it was a bit harder for her to do it, but I eventually was able to break Coralic away from the pack. That's good, since I did want to save Madoc for last, since he has a habit of running off screen which might alert his other brethren. As you can see, 1v1 this girl takes on any monster extremely well. The life tap was just to let the mercenary survive, since I really did not need any help from him at this stage. My lightning damage was more than enough. Talic was much the same, if a bit more dangerous. Since he was extra fast, he did give me some grief, as sorceresses aren't really meant to face tank extra fast cold enchanted whirlwinds from a Hell Ancient. However, in the damage department they do really well, and I don't need to mention that because her performance really speaks for herself. I didn't dare static him since I was so scared of aggroing him onto me, but that didn't cost much time as lightning was able to take him out pretty quickly as well. Then there was Maddock, and yeah, he had Holy Freeze on him. It is my fault, honestly. I should have maybe been paying more attention to his rolls a bit too closely, but like I mentioned, I was busy ensuring that the other two will be handleable that honestly I didn't even consider him. Of course, he decides to be an absolute troll and chooses the combination of two rolls that look fine at first, Aura Enchanted and Lightning Enchanted, but because of the Aura being Holy Freeze, neither could I kill him with my Mercenary since his weapon speed was just too slow after getting frozen, and him being Lightning Enchanted meant that lower res would not break his immunity either. Well played, idiot. It is not that bad, honestly. I was pretty pleased with how the rest of the fight went, and therefore I wasn't too opposed to repeat it. Thus I went through the motions again. This time Maddock got lured in second. You can see what I was talking about before, where Maddock was hell-bent on running to the bottom, where Talik was also there. Thus I had to teleport smartly to get him to back him into a corner away from Talik. Once that was done, it was a matter of keeping the life tap on him and having the Merc hitting him continuously. The roll was a lot tamer this time, with Spectral Hit and Fire Enchanted, although it did have me sweating for a few moments, especially as my Mercenary died after a while. I was half expecting lower res to not work here due to the Spectral Hit, but thankfully I was wrong. If anything, with lower res, Lightning seemed to do the job way quicker, even with his Lightning res being higher due to the Spectral Hit mod. The important thing being that I was able to take him out finally, and the final boss was Talik, right, he still exists. This Talik kill was considerably more annoying than the previous one though, since I did not have my Mercenary as a meat shield and thus had to revert to this strat where I stood away from him in a straight line, and as the YouTube comments will tell you, if you post a Whirlwind Barbarian mini playthrough, whirlwinding in a straight line is extremely inefficient, which allows me to dodge them really easily and go for lightning, rinse and repeat till he goes down. Now I did have some trouble with the waves since Baal literally threw out wave 5 as soon as I was done with the last guy of wave 4, and of course they were mana burned and cold enchanted. I mean, why would they not be that exact combination at that very moment? Thankfully I had a safety TP set up, thanks chat, which allowed me to lure out Lister and his boys and then teleport back to Baal to finish him off and this mini playthrough. Thus we conclude our first mini playthrough that I live streamed. This was a lot of fun. I honestly made plenty of changes in the build and gear and the way that I did things on the fly just because somebody in the stream recommended something to me which sounded good, and thus it was a really interesting experience overall. If that sounds like something you want to join, I stream every single day for now on YouTube right here at 3:30 PM GMT. I would also encourage you to join our Discord where we talk Diablo 2, I can give stream updates, and we just have a general hoot. The link for the same will be in the description. Other than that, I hope you found this content riveting. Yours truly, with love.